My name is Rosalina Navarro, but most people used to call me Lola Rosa. I was born in Quezon City in 1943, in a time when rice was rationed and hope was passed down like a family recipe, carefully and often in secret. My mother taught me to survive with kindness. My father taught me to hold my tongue because the world rarely listened to brown girls. I was the eldest of 5 and the first to leave. When I was 20, I met a man named Gerald Navarro, an American Air Force mechanic stationed in the Philippines. He loved my laugh, he said it sounded like rain dancing on a tin roof. We married in a tiny chapel, and I left my homeland with only one suitcase, one rosary, and one promise: that I'd make a better life, no matter what. We settled in Rochester, New York, where winter was cruel and long. The snow came down like silence, and I missed the mango trees and the sound of tricycles in the street. Still, Gerald made it easier. He held my cold hands every night, and we built something real. We had 2 children, Lucas and Marion, and I poured every ounce of myself into them. I stayed home, raised them with the discipline I learned from my own mother and the warmth I never got from her. I sewed their clothes by hand, packed warm lunches with handwritten notes in broken English, and taught them how to say po and opo. Even when they rolled their eyes, I gave them everything I had. And then more. Lucas grew up tall and restless. He moved to Buffalo with his wife Stephanie, who always treated me like an outdated custom. She didn't like the way I smelled like Vicks and ginger, didn't like my accent, said I embarrassed them when I brought lumpia to church potlucks. Marion, my daughter, chose the city. She became someone sleek and polished. Hair always straightened, Tagalog forgotten, heritage hidden beneath her designer coat. When people asked where her mother was from, she'd pause and say, "Oh, somewhere in Southeast Asia." Like I was a map she didn't want to open. They visited for a while, holidays mostly, then birthdays, then only when someone died. And when Gerald passed 6 years ago, they came not to comfort, but to calculate. Lucas kept asking if we'd updated the will. Marion wandered around the house taking photos of furniture with her phone. I sat at the kitchen table, holding Gerald's wedding ring, and I realized I was now a guest in the very life I built. The house on Maple Hollow Road was old. Gerald and I had bought it when our babies were still toddlers, their handprints once stamped in the cement sidewalk outside. It was small and creaky, but every wall held memories. I couldn't bring myself to leave, so I stayed, alone, with a radio that played AM love songs and a rocking chair that faced the window. Then came winter, a real upstate winter where the snow was heavy and the sky forgot how to smile. I was making caldo on a Thursday morning when the world tilted. I had been climbing a step stool to reach a jar of bay leaves, and something gave out in my leg. I crashed to the linoleum floor, soup boiling, knees screaming. I couldn't get up. My phone was just out of reach. For 5 hours, I lay there, shivering in pain, staring at the ceiling fan, the blades spinning slowly like old regrets. When I finally crawled to the phone, I didn't call Lucas. I didn't call Marion. I called 911. The paramedics came, young and kind, and they looked around the house like it was a museum. One of them asked if I had any family nearby. I told him yes, but I meant no. The hospital said I'd fractured my kneecap. Not bad enough for surgery, but I'd need help, real help. Someone to assist with bathing, cooking, stairs. Lucas called the hospital back with one sentence: "She should be in a home." Marion emailed a few links to senior care centres. She didn't even ask if I was okay. That's how I ended up at a place called Evergreen Pines Assisted Living, a soft name for a place that felt like a waiting room for the forgotten. My room smelled like bleach. The walls were a sad beige. The TV didn't work unless you kicked it just right. Every resident looked like they'd been waiting for someone for too long. No one came to visit. Not on my birthday, not on Christmas. Lucas sent a gift card to Target. Marion sent a text that said, "Hope you're adjusting." I didn't reply. I spent most of my days looking out the window at the parking lot, where snow kept piling up like all the things I never said. I thought often about the bay leaves, about how something so small, one moment, one slip, could change everything. Then one morning, she arrived. Her name was Leah, a nurse in her early 30s. She had warm almond eyes and curly black hair tied up in a puff. She wore earrings shaped like suns, and her laugh sounded like home. Not the house, not the land, but the feeling. She started small. A new pillow, a lavender sachet, an extra helping of rice when the others only got mashed potatoes. She asked questions, real ones. Where I was from, what I missed, what music I liked. When I told her about Kundiman songs and old Filipino films, her eyes lit up. She said her son loved music too, a little boy named Mateo, 5 years old, half black, half Puerto Rican, and full of questions. Leah began to sit with me on her lunch breaks. Sometimes she braided my hair, sometimes she just listened. When I told her about Gerald, about how he used to fix radios and sing Sinatra out of tune, she laughed and squeezed my hand. No one had touched me gently in so long. Every week she brought something small, mangoes, a scarf, a letter from Mateo that just said, "Hi Lola Rosa, thank you for being kind." That letter I taped to my wall. It meant more than every birthday card my own children never sent. But kindness doesn't go unnoticed. One night I passed by the nurse's station and heard Leah whispering into her phone. She thought no one was listening. She was crying, saying rent was late again, that she had to choose between groceries and bus fare, that she might have to move back in with her mother and share a room with Mateo. Her voice broke in that soft, silent way only tired women know. Something inside me cracked, the same way the cement cracked outside my old porch when Lucas tried to rip up the sidewalk to make room for a new driveway, cold and careless. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling and thought of all the ways life hands you love in the wrong people and family in the strangers. The next morning I called my lawyer. He had been Gerald's friend, trusted, loyal. I told him I wanted to change everything, the will, the estate, the house. I wanted nothing to go to Lucas or Marion, nothing. Not even the china set Marion always said would look good in her Brooklyn condo. I told him to give it all to Leah, not just the house, but the savings, the pension, even the rocking chair, because she had sat beside me when no one else would. He hesitated, like all men do when a woman makes a decision they do not expect. "Are you sure?" he asked. I said, "I gave them my life. She gave me hers when I had nothing left." That was enough. Spring came, slow and muddy. My knee healed, but I didn't ask to return home. There was no home, just rooms full of silence. I sold the house quietly. Leah didn't know, not yet. I just told her I wanted to downsize. I moved into a small apartment near the library. She helped me unpack. She cried when she saw her name on the deed. I told her she deserved more than thanks. She deserved a future. Lucas called once, asking why the house wasn't listed under my name anymore. I told him it had gone to someone who remembered I was still alive. He didn't call back. Marion sent an email, no subject, just 3 words. "How could you?" I didn't answer. Lucas and Marion weren't the kind of children who took no for an answer. That came from being raised in a country where entitlement looks like ambition and selfishness is mistaken for self-worth. When the lawyer delivered the updated will, Lucas showed up at my apartment unannounced for the first time in years. He didn't knock kindly. He pounded like a man owed something. I was pouring tea when the door shook, and for a second I thought it was the wind again. But when I opened it, there he stood, my son, older now, round in the face, tight in the shoulders, and thinner in the patience. He didn't say hello, didn't ask how I was healing. He stepped inside without permission, saw the boxes still stacked near the wall, and said one word, "Why?" I didn't look up. I poured tea for 2, like I always did, even when I was alone. I motioned for him to sit. He didn't. I told him the truth, that the house was never what he wanted. It was what I had built. That love, like inheritance, isn't a right, but a response. And that I had waited for years, Years for him to see me, not as a burden, not as a broken old woman, but as the mother who used to wake at 4 a.m. to iron his shirts and pack his lunches and pray the snow wouldn't stop the bus. He called me bitter, said Leah had manipulated me, that a stranger couldn't be family. But oh, if he only knew how little he felt like my son in those moments. Marion sent a lawyer, not her own letter, just a man in a suit with too much cologne and too little soul. He tried to scare me with words like revocable and mental fitness. I offered him tea too. He declined. I told him to tell Marion I was still mentally fit enough to remember she hadn't called me on Christmas in 4 years. When the threat stopped, the silence returned, and it was loud. But Leah stayed. Every Sunday, she brought Matteo. He carried a backpack full of markers and little folded drawings of stick figures, one always labelled Lola Rosa. Sometimes he'd fall asleep on my lap while I hummed old Kundiman songs, and I'd forget the ache in my knees and the scar on my heart. There is something about children who love without obligation. It heals you. We made new traditions. I taught Leah how to cook adobo the way my mother did, boiled first, then fried for crisp. She took notes. I showed her how to rub ginger on aching joints, how to hang garlic for protection, and how to fold banana leaves for suman. She listened like I was a holy book. One Sunday in May, she brought her mother, Clarabelle, a woman with hips like mine and hands that had seen too much. She held my gaze for a long moment, then hugged me without asking. I could smell eucalyptus oil and something older, something warm. We didn't speak much that day, but the silence was kind. In that little apartment, we made a family, not of blood, but of choice. One morning, I woke before the sun, as I often did. I sat by the window, tea in hand, and watched the snow begin to fall again, soft as ash. And for the first time in years, I did not feel forgotten. But fate has a habit of testing your peace. That winter, the nursing facility where I used to stay came under investigation. Allegations of neglect. A patient had died alone, unfound for days. Photos leaked, mold, bruises, cold trays of untouched food. Leah was devastated. She had worked there for 5 years, had warned them, filed reports, begged supervisors to do more. Now the news painted her guilty by association. The state suspended her license pending review, no paycheck, no backup. She cried in my arms, said she didn't know what she'd do, that she failed everyone. I told her the truth, that failure isn't when the world punishes you, it's when you abandon your character. And Leah had never once done that. Still, bills mounted. Matteo needed school clothes. Clarabelle's insulin ran low. Leah took overnight cleaning jobs at a downtown office, came home with red hands and sore feet. She tried to hide it. I noticed anyway. I began to write letters again, one to a friend of Gerald's, an old Navy buddy who had become a school board trustee, another to a local Filipino association I hadn't spoken to in decades. Then one to a journalist I once met at a church event who had written about elder neglect. I told them about Leah, not about me, about her. Weeks passed, then a call came. The school board offered Leah a job as a community liaison for underprivileged students and immigrant families. Less pay than nursing, but steady. She cried again, but differently this time. The investigation eventually cleared her name, her license was restored, but she chose not to return. Said she wanted to work where she could build, not survive. I began to see less of her during the week, but every Sunday, Matteo still came running into my arms. I kept all his drawings in a shoebox labelled Proof. Spring melted into summer. I tended to a tiny balcony garden, basil, calamansi, mint. My knees hurt, but the sun made it bearable. Then one morning a letter arrived. Marion again, but this time not cold. It was handwritten. She said she'd seen a photo of me in a local paper with Leah and Matteo standing at the school board award ceremony. She said I looked happy, she apologized, said she didn't know how to be close to me, that she'd always felt like she wasn't enough, that I had loved her more when she was little before she grew into someone American. I sat with the letter for a long time. I didn't cry, just breathed. Then wrote back. I told her I had always loved her, even when she forgot who she was, even when she buried our heritage under ambition. I told her she didn't need to come back, but that if she did, I'd be here. She didn't reply. Lucas never wrote again. The world went on. My body slowed. My eyes needed stronger glasses. I forgot names sometimes, but not faces. One afternoon, Matteo ran up to me, holding a school paper. It was an essay called My Hero. He wrote about a woman who gave his mama a house, who taught him how to roll lumpia, who wore old slippers and smelled like ginger tea. At the bottom, he wrote, "She isn't my real grandma, but she loves like one." That's when I cried, really cried, the kind of cry that comes from the marrow. It washed away years. The apartment began to feel like a haven, not a cage. We had movie nights, music nights, even karaoke once. I sang Dahil Sayo, and Matteo danced with a blanket wrapped around his waist. We laughed until my stomach hurt. And still the silence from my children remained. That silence used to feel like punishment. Now it felt like mercy. They had chosen a path, so had I. Clarabelle passed a few years after me, quietly, with her daughter beside her and Matteo reading psalms at her bedside. They buried her next to a cherry blossom tree. Leah said the first bloom that spring came early, and that she knew it was a sign. Years later, when Matteo graduated high school, he gave a speech. He didn't talk about grades or scholarships. He talked about his two grandmothers, one who gave him life, one who gave him love. He said they both taught him how to be gentle in a world that punishes gentleness. He said, "I am who I am because someone chose to see me, not as an obligation, but as a blessing." And there it was, my legacy, not in money, not in a house, but in a boy's voice, in his tenderness, in the truth that sometimes the family that abandons you makes room for the family you're meant to find. I imagine now the snow still falls in upstate New York. I imagine the quiet mornings, the tea steaming on the table. I imagine Leah, older now, humming the same songs I once did. I imagine Matteo, grown, visiting Rosa's haven with his own children. Maybe he points to my portrait on the wall, the one with me wearing my old floral dress, laughing, eyes closed. Maybe he tells them stories about a Lola who made the best adobo and kept love in Tupperware. Maybe they don't remember my name, that's okay. What matters is they remember the warmth. Because love doesn't die. It lingers, in soup, in song, in silence, in someone showing up when no one else does. And if you ever pass by a quiet window in the snow and you see an old rocking chair facing the light, know that someone once sat there, waiting for a family, and found something better. The moral is not about revenge, not even justice, it's about choice. We do not choose how others love us, but we do choose how we love back. And if we're lucky, that choice becomes our real inheritance. Not gold, not land, but the memory of kindness, passed on like flame in a storm, small, fragile, and enough to light 1,000 homes.